Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 6 of Cooling Inflammation, where we're going to dive deep into pain and the musculoskeletal system. This is actually kind of like part 1. It's a little bit different this week in that we're going to have a part 2, which you might have already seen in your email, or if you're watching on the recording, you might already see in the classroom. But for those of us who are just live in the moment, I'm going to share a little bit more about part 2 in just a moment. But as always, I want to acknowledge that here we are, week 6, and you all are still showing up, whether you're watching live or watching the recording. Big round of applause, big pats on the back, and it's fabulous that you are dedicated and committed to this and are coming back week after week. So big round of applause. And I'm super excited for this week because this week, the pain in the musculoskeletal system is basically what inspired this whole class, right? Because that is often where we feel inflammation, is it results in pain in some way or another. And it's also interesting what's come up in the past decade or so about how we can actually address pain, move through pain. And what we're understanding is just a very dynamic look at the musculoskeletal system and the nervous system. You really can't separate those two, and how we can address pain holistically in that way, which the result being that we have more resilient bodies that serve us better through longevity. I love seeing everybody come in and greet us on the chat, share where you're from, all of that. I love it. It's fun to know that there are folks out there. And I also just love all of your enthusiasm. So thank you for all of that. And then as a reminder, as I dive into class, the chat is very distracting to me, and I've heard from students distracting to them as well. So I appreciate everyone saying hi. And as we dive into class, we'll keep the chat, I want to say mellow, but non-existent is a better word. And then we'll pick that back up again, of course, in the Q&A. All right, so with that, we're just going to dive straight in to the content this week. Pain and the musculoskeletal system. I hope I don't have to say that a whole bunch. All right, so my first point that I want to make for this class is that regular movement and exercise is one of the most powerful medicines available. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you a bunch of slides documenting studies and evidence to support this claim. I'm really going for quantity here, which you'll see, but meaning the point is not that you have to like soak in and memorize all that I'm about to share. But I do hope that it adds up to be something that is both impressive and inspiring. The first one is a study that comes to us from 1985. This is the anti-inflammatory effect of exercise study. And this is, again, 1985, was a couple of years ago. And they said that regular exercise offers protection against all-cause mortality, primarily by protection against cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes mellitus. So we've already talked about that in particular for the cardiovascular and type 2 diabetes. We're going to talk about a little bit more today. But what's interesting to me about this study is that, again, it's from a few years ago. And at this point, there's a definitive study saying, yes, this is necessary. But in all those years, we haven't seen a strong cultural stride towards regular exercise. And of course, in that time, we've seen type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease increase exponentially. Here's another study from 2015, a little bit more recent, showing all of the diseases, chronic diseases, and probably not, I shouldn't say all, but we're looking at 26 different chronic diseases that exercise has benefits for. I'm not going to read through them all, but this is basically showing there's a lot of chronic diseases out there, a lot of them with roots in inflammation, and exercise has been shown to be beneficial in many of them. Another benefit here is that exercise reduces depression and inflammation. This study was looking at intensity. So intensity matters, and the And the results of this suggest that moderate intensity exercise may be an optimal intensity of exercise for the promotion of mental health. All right, we mentioned cardiovascular system. That's one that I think tends to be a no-brainer. I think we have definitely learned that through our lives, that exercise is incredibly beneficial to the cardiovascular system. Um, the notes here are that substantial evidence has established the value of high levels of physical activities, exercise training, and overall cardiorespiratory fitness in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular diseases, and that the data strongly supports the routine prescription of exercise training to all patients and referrals for patients with cardiovascular diseases, especially coronary heart disease and heart failure, to specific cardiac rehabilitation and ET programs. This one, just further expanding on the benefits for the cardiovascular system. It can modulate cholesterol effects in the vasculature. It promotes, on the second point there, promotes a healthy anti-inflammatory milieu, stimulates myocardial regeneration. And that third point, which I think was just fascinating, is that the benefits of exercise might also occur via promotion of a healthy gut microbiota, which of course is just showing that connection all over again, right? As much, I always want to accentuate that because I have broken the class down into systems, but that's kind of a farce, right? Where it's all connected. This is looking at exercise specific for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is often a result of oxidative stress and inflammation. And this resulted in the researchers saying that regular exercise can be considered as an effective strategy for the treatment of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. All right, these ones we've already seen before, but just as a reminder that exercise is incredibly important for the prevention and treatment of type 2 diabetes. Resistance training builds muscle mass, a process that can take weeks, admittedly, but it also improves the sensitivity of insulin receptors so that the muscle cells can absorb their fuel, glucose, more easily. Then I love this. The process results almost immediately from doing resistance exercise, and the effect can last for days. And this is showing that at acute resistance exercise sessions at light or moderate intensities are effective for controlling blood glucose in individuals with type 2 diabetes. That's something I saw again and again in clinical practice. People who are willing to commit to exercise and in resistance training found that they could eat a wider range of foods and that their blood sugar was controlled much more readily. Exercise is an essential component of all diabetes prevention and lifestyle intervention programs. Exercise training, whether aerobic or resistance training, or a combination, which is even better, facilitates improved glucose regulation. Lots of benefits showing that exercise is so important for cognitive health, including things like Alzheimer's disease, and basically showing that older adults who exercise are more likely to maintain cognition. Exercise also regulates the immune system. So more of that cross-sectionality here. Regular exercise could reduce the risk of chronic metabolic and cardiorespiratory diseases, partially by anti-inflammatory effects of exercise. Woo! I'm just excited because of the whole chronic inflammation thing, right? That's why we're here, cooling inflammation. Exercise and regulation of immune functions. That exercise has a profound effect on the normal functioning of the immune system. And it's interesting that they show that prolonged periods of intensive exercise can be a problem, but that moderate intensity is beneficial. And then concluding that exercise is a powerful behavioral intervention that has the potential to improve immune and health outcomes in the elderly, the obese, and patients living with cancer and chronic viral infections like HIV. Speaking of cancer, there's studies showing that exercise protects from cancer through the regulation of immune function and inflammation, and it can target tumor growth through the immune system. And so they're recommending that that be recommended as part of an oncology program. Then there's varicose veins, right? Like spider veins, varicose veins, all of those are chronic venous insufficiency And the conclusion of this trial was that our findings will lead to the planning of interventions to increase the level of physical activity in chronic venous insufficiency patients. And of course, we're making it very relative for these days, looking at how exercise might be impacting COVID-19. And there's evidence that regular physical activity is associated with a reduced risk for COVID-19. And also that regular exercise can help those who have had COVID-19 and improve and be helpful in the improvement of physical fitness, quality of life, and immune health. This is looking at another study looking at post COVID or long haul COVID. And individuals with lasting symptoms of COVID 19 should be offered a comprehensive recovery program. In this cohort study, there were 30 individuals that completed a 6-week, twice supervised rehabilitation program, which demonstrated statistically significant improvements in exercise capacity, respiratory systems, fatigue, and cognition. And so their recommendation is that for post-COVID, long haul COVID, that exercise significantly improves clinical outcomes. One reason that exercise might be so helpful, and there is assuredly many, but one might be that by elevating your body temperature internally, you're helping to reduce low grade inflammation. And so, this is a study looking at those who might be unable to exercise. However, I think there's a lot of modifications that can help people to exercise no matter where they're at. But basically, this is saying that baths and saunas can help too. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And that this like kind of fancily worded thing says there are potential benefits and mechanisms of active and passive heating methods. I love how they say hot water immersion. Yeah, like a bath or a hot tub, sauna therapy, that are to reduce chronic low grade inflammation and improve metabolic health. So, yay for baths and saunas as well. Okay, so I've just shown you, I know, a bunch of slides and a bunch of studies. I'm trying to make the case that exercise is incredible medicine, and there's just truly no herb for that, right? There's just no herb that replaces the benefits of exercise. That's something that we need to engage in every day. I also want to make the point that movement and resistance training is one of the best practices to relieve musculoskeletal pain and inflammation. Which brings me to part 2 of this, which in a few days on next Wednesday, and again, if you're watching on the recording, it might already be available. But next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to be interviewing Samantha Butts. She's a kinesiologist and a certified kettlebell coach, and also my personal trainer. And this woman amazes me. She truly does. And sometimes it can be hard to impress me, but she truly does. And she doesn't even own a cat, and she didn't know who Tori Amos was. So she had a lot going against her. But despite all of that, through personal trainings with sessions with her, I see her twice a week, and she is just so on it. And I want to read this little section from her bio here. Sam supports her clients in establishing movement proficiency and confidence, learning the why behind the what, which you've probably heard from someone else before, and building the reassurance needed to be better equipped to self-manage their pain as it arises. She believes in training for resilience and longevity across the health span through life, sport, and play, and understands strength as the foundation of everything we do and everything we are. It's all about building a bigger cup to pour from. Or live from. So she and I really align a lot philosophically, looking at the why, not getting too focused on the what, but also about how we can expand our lives, right? I'm always about joyfully adding things to our lives rather than eliminating things, and looking about how our lives can be more expansive, because sometimes when we're having issues with our health, our lives can become smaller and smaller and smaller. And that is certainly the case when we're dealing with chronic pain, especially. All right, so moving through pain, I just made up that title. I hope it makes sense. But with Samantha Butts, Sam, and she sent me over the outline of what she wants to cover, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say too. Plus, she's just like infectiously fun. So I think we're going to have a great time with that. Okay, so this is what often happens with chronic pain. And certainly we're going to be talking about this a lot with Sam, but for the purposes of this, I just want to bring up that what can happen with pain is that you're in pain. And because of that, you decrease your movement because you want to avoid pain, right? Nobody's really rushing towards pain. But this creates this really vicious cycle of less activity means more pain means less activity, and your world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is something that happened to me. I was hit by a car when I was 14 I was a pedestrian. And I, had suffered a lot of injuries from that. And over the years, my life just became smaller and smaller and smaller. I didn't get physical therapy. I didn't get really help through that. I would go see massage and body workers who, was just a great thing. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it didn't really get to the underlying cause. And so I had chronic inflammatory hip pain for so much of my life. And I just had, even though I'd sought out, answers for that hip pain, and nothing I had done for decades had worked until I found strength training. So anyway, I'm a big believer in the strength training, and it's been so fascinating for me to see that by actively engaging my body, how much less pain I have, and really resting my hip was not getting me anywhere. All right, I think a lot of what this vicious cycle of pain and then less movement and pain, less movement, and how that all coalesces into this awful vicious cycle, it comes to do a lot with rice. But actually, not that rice, right? No, this rice. Rest, ice, compression, elevate. So RICE, this acronym, came up. This guy invented it in like the 70s, right? And said this is how we should treat our injuries: is that we should rest, we should ice the injury, we should compress the injury, and we should elevate the injury. And this is actually a big no. Just no, this is not what we do, right? There, in some small instances, like compartment syndrome, you might want to ice, but for the most part, you don't want to ice. This is not something that was done traditionally. And this is something that I have been talking about for like 15 years, not to sound like I'm all important. But when I first started mentioning no rice, boy, did I get a lot of kickback on that. And it's not like I was so brilliant that I came up with it. It was from studying Chinese medicine. So in Chinese medicine, they have this incredible history of super advanced ways and time tested and effective ways to address injury. And ice is such a big no on in Chinese medicine as well. And instead, they're using herbs to promote movement, right? And to get things moving. What happens is when we have an injury, our bodies are amazing, right? When we have an injury, it creates an inflammatory response, and it creates this whole cascade of different enzymes and hormones in our body that are going to the area to start repairing our body, right? Because our bodies repair themselves. But what ice does is it slows down that entire situation, so that all of the circulation that is bringing these healing enzymes and hormones to the area is being slowed down. And then all of the things that are trying to get cleaned out of that area are getting slowed down as well. So it's a bad scene, the rice. So it's a big no-no. And now we're moving towards meat, which last year a student hilariously pointed out means that even our injury prevention or injury addressing is becoming more paleo. So I just thought that was funny. But that meat is about movement, exercise, analgesics, which is commonly recommended to do things like ibuprofen. But I suggest herbs instead, and treatment. And so the idea with meat when you have an injury is not that you're like in pain and then you do a bunch of like wild and crazy exercise and movement that makes you more in pain, right? That's not what we're doing. But gentle movement that is not exacerbating the pain. Then as you're healing from that, you can move from gentle movement to exercise as tolerated. Again, it's not trying to re-injure yourself or create negative experience there. Again, analgesics, ibuprofen, and other anti-inflammatories are often recommended, but I don't recommend them if they can be avoided. I understand that sometimes we're in a lot of pain and that can be helpful. I'm not necessarily a tyrant about it, but herbs can be an amazing place to turn to relieve pain and promote healing at the same time. Ibuprofen does not promote healing. Um, just relieves the pain. And then treatment, meaning working with somebody like Sam or another professional who's able to help you rehabilitate post injury. All right, that's that for meat. And we can talk to Sam more about this as well. Our new recipe for this week is a ginger and cramp bark fomentation. I created this recipe for myself when my back used to go out all the time, which it doesn't anymore because of strength training. But this was something I turn to all the time, and it is so relieving in terms of helping with the pain. So when I say instead of ibuprofen, turn to something else, this can be one of those examples. The ginger in this, there's ginger and cayenne powder, which is helping to increase circulation, so you can increase those healing activities as well as helping to clean out the area. So there's not, that in itself will help with swelling because you're promoting things moving in and out more quickly. And then there's cramp bark, which is a wonderful plant, as well named, that can help reduce tension through the nervous system and musculoskeletal system, so that tension that often comes with an injury can be relaxed, also, which can also help promote the healing. So this is a recipe you can try. I hope you never need it, but if you do, there it is. All right, so when you think of movement, we have to think of what a cat would do. Wait, that doesn't make sense. No, there we go. So when we think about movement, we have to think, what would a cat do? And the thing about cats is that you really can't force them to do anything they don't want to do, right? And cats, of course, are famous for sleeping, but they will also be active in their own joyful ways, right? They'll get out there and move in the ways that they want to move, which is what I'm suggesting that you all do. So one of our invitations for this week is joyful movement. And the joyful part is so important because I think that's a big part of why we have so much resistance culturally to exercise and movement. It's because we forget the joy. I blame gym class. I think that was kind of a traumatic experience for a lot of people. I blame gym class. I blame injuries and not rehabilitating from injuries. And so our lives get smaller because we're, pain avoidance. So there's a lot of reasons, but I think lacking that joy is a big one. As I mentioned before, there's just no herb for exercise, no substitution. But it truly is one of the most powerful medicines available. So we have to find joyful movement. How do you like to move? Because there's so many fabulous ways to move. Whether you like to do it by yourself, with the dog, with your friend. I'm a walker myself. I walk practically every single day. And for me, I recognize that while I'm getting a good amount of exercise on my walk, it's also about my mental health. When I'm out there, I answered to no one. Karen and Michelle, they cannot get in touch with me when I'm on my walk. Not that I mind hearing from you all, but it's just this moment where I get to literally unplug and just be outside. And I go all throughout the year. So I'm out there, whether it's 0 degrees and I'm dressed in full wool, or it's super hot and dry and dusty. And there's a magic in that too, right? Of just watching the seasons change. And I have some pretty amazing experiences out there. Like the other day, I was serenaded by a bunch of wolves howling. But it's truly the little things that add up to this kind of wondrous beauty of just a simple walk, watching squirrels scamper through the trees, or seeing the beauty of the leaves changing, watching the first flowers emerge in the spring. The summer, just wishing I was actually at the lake because it's too hot. But whatever it is that you like to do, maybe it's team sports, dancing, it's finding that joyful movement and then committing to it regularly. So how much movement is beneficial? Well, this is from the World Health Organization. And the recommendation is 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity per week. That didn't make the slide, but that's per week, not per day, per week. Plus, and this is an important plus, you want to also be doing muscle strengthening activities at moderate or greater intensity that involve all major muscle groups on 2 or more days a week. So that is the general recommendation when we're thinking about exercise as medicine. However, the goal is always progress, not perfection. Okay, so if you're like looking at your life and you're thinking, wow, I'm seeing that the recommendation is 150 to 300 minutes a week. I might get 10 minutes. The idea is not to suddenly jump to 150, right? But to joyfully welcome more movement into your life over time. So progress always, not perfection. And also be thinking about strength training. I love my fitness tracker. You might hate it. I mean, it's just a personality thing, right? But I love mine. So I just wanted to mention that as one way that you can keep track and just be very realistic and honest about your movements throughout the day and throughout the week is to get a fitness tracker. I love mine. I use it as just a record of what's going on in my life. And I love, now they're pretty fancy and you can look at your heart rate variability, which is something I like to do, resting heart rate. And I'm often looking at those are kind of the two things I look at the most. Now, they're in touch with how well you sleep. You can keep track of your menstrual cycles through these apps. And there's all sorts of things you can do with the fitness tracker. Again, if you don't like it and you're just appalled at the idea of wearing one, then obviously it's not for you. But for those of you who might like that, it's a good way, again, just to kind of be honest and to keep you honest about how our things are doing because we tend to over exaggerate these things in our lives. Also, if there's a little, again, if you're not super active now, going for a nice stroll outside is nice. But as you become more physically fit, then increasing that to more moderate intensity is important. And the fitness trackers will tell you that too. Okay, so far we've been talking about kind of aerobic activity, movement in general, but I also want to specifically highlight more about strength because this is really a game changer. As I was mentioning, resistance training is one of the best things you can do if you have pain in your body, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? But so often the reason why we have pain is because our muscles aren't working well. They aren't activating well. If we're not able to move our body in dynamic ways, then we create compensation patterns that then create some pain. So, resistance training is so important. It's important at every stage of our entire lives, increasingly, I don't want to say increasingly important, but continually to be important as we age, because this keeps us agile, keeps us able to be better balanced, keeps us from falling, so that we can age better with longevity as well. So I feel like a lot of times when we talk about personal trainers, resistance trainers, gyms, we have this vision of, like the bro gym dude, right? Super muscular, working out with the trainer, often on machines and that sort of stuff. And obviously that exists and great that it exists, right? But I do want to just say that strength training is for every single body, right? It's for every body, it's for every stage of life. And you can find a trainer who has the same values or goals as you do, and who, they might be found at a gym, they might be found at their own personal studio. You can also nowadays, of course, do personal trainers online, which is what I do with Sam. And it's just amazing that I get to stay home. And she's just brilliant, as I've mentioned, but she can see very well like what I'm doing and still has the, great cues. So personal training and strength training is for everybody. And I do think that if you've never done strength training, or even if you have, working with a personal trainer when you first start out is very important. Anytime you do one on one training of any kind, it's going to be more expensive. So there's that. But even if you can start with just a few sessions with somebody as a personal trainer, just help make sure your form is well done. And also to figure out where you start because you want to start where you're at. You don't want to start because you see the person next to you doing this much weight, right? You just want to start where you're at. And a personal trainer can assess you and help you figure that out and help you move forward too. Sam's going to talk a lot about that. Progressive strength training is really, really important. So it's not that you each week do the same thing over and over again. There has some benefit to that, but you're not going to see progress. You might not, relieve your pain as well. You might not see results as well. So it's not about doing the same thing every week, but a trainer that you check in with regularly can help you keep moving forward. All right, so you have your strength training invitation. In there, I list some resources for you, whether it's one-on-one training like with Sam, or other things. I have some free options in there. And again, this is one of the most powerful things you can do to alleviate muscle pain. and prevent injury and just have a more expansive life. And I really think this could make a huge difference in your life if you're not already there. All right, this is Sam again. Hi, Sam. So she offers personal training. Also, in the bonus section, you're going to see, and within the classroom, you're going to see a thing for BOPO Fitness, Body Positive Fitness. This is a fantastic business. They're in Ontario, Canada, but offer lots of online resources. You can get one on one personal training there. You can do their community classes, which I highly recommend. And they have all sorts of great classes, ranging from resistance to things like Zumba, relaxation things. So huge variety and just a super fun organization that's really there. Oh yeah, I have their call to action there. This is from their site. Body positive fitness is an approach to physical activity that helps you to feel good in your body. We encourage you to rediscover joyful movement and functional fitness as ways you can become stronger, faster, more energetic, and experience all the other amazing benefits that come from moving your body without any focus on changing your appearance. So, again, I was mentioning if we have these ideas about changing our appearance, if that doesn't happen immediately, sometimes that can be a discouragement and then we drop it. This really is more about a way of life. So, yeah, and they say, exercise is great for so many reasons, but when we're fixated on moving for the sole purpose of changing how we look, fitness loses all joy. And lastly, we encourage clients to find that joy again in a safe and supportive community. So I love this organization or business. They're fabulous. And because I have an in, I have a big discount for you. So again, you can find this in the bonus section of the classroom. And if you click on the link in there, you'll go to their website and this little pop-up will show that you can save 30% off a 5-class pass. You want to just X out of that pop-up and go down and you'll see how you can save 50% off of a 5-class pass. So you can go check them out. And I highly recommend it. I know lots of folks did last year with cooling inflammation and they loved it. So they're a fun business to know about. All right. So the next section that we're going to talk about is Tai Chi and Qigong. And this is a practice that is about movement and breath. It's meditative, improves your balance, helps you to decrease stress, it promotes your agility. And in the invitation, I include some of my favorite videos and classes. And a friend of mine teaches free Qigong classes just once a week. It's about a 15-minute class, and you can join live or you can get the recording. But that's just a free thing that he offers. So that's something that you can check out if you want to do this invitation. I was first introduced to Qigong through my Chinese medicine studies. I was going down to California for these, I don't know if they're week-long intensives or 10-day long intensives. I can't remember. But this was like back when I was baby herbalist and I had like very, very little money. And so I was doing the work trade. So basically what that meant is that class was from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. And then of course there were 3 meals served and I did the dishes with, other folks too. It wasn't just me. But I did the dishes for something like 3 to 5 hours per day on top of classes, right? So I was going to class and then doing dishes. And I decided to go, there was an early morning class of Qigong. So I'd wake up early. The other thing is I slept in a dorm because that was cheaper. So the dorm had tons of people in it. So, not the best sleep. I wake up early, went to Qigong classes, and they were amazing. And I felt just so energized throughout my whole day. And it just made all of the difference. And I remember one day I didn't make it, and that made all the difference too. So I love Qigong. I practice it regularly. Tai Chi is there, different modalities, but very similar. So it's wonderful. Anybody can do it. It's again, meditative breath work, which we've been talking about. So wonderful way to get more movement into your life. It's not necessarily a moderate amount of intensity, but it's certainly profound. Next up, yoga. So I realize that a lot of you probably know about Qigong and Tai Chi and also yoga, but I had to mention it. This is a mindful physical and spiritual practice that originated in India, but has spread, of course, throughout the world. improves strength, agility, and decreases stress. Yoga is something I practice all the time. I've been practicing since I was 16, and I started because it's one of the only memories I have of my mom, who died when I was quite young. But I remember her doing the PBS station yoga, and so I got into that as well. And yeah, when I do yoga regularly, I feel more flexible, I feel more graceful, confident, and I just feel awesome. So, yoga is a wonderful way to just, again, wonderful for stress relief and just a wonderful way to get in touch with your body. And there, one thing about yoga that is unfortunate is that for a long time, I think the yoga is portrayed as this like you do these like super intense poses and there's not many people who would look at like this image and think, "Oh, yeah, I can do that. I'm going to do that," right? But really yoga is truly for everybody out there. It's for all ages, for all body types, for the whole family. And I think it's best if you can find a local yoga studio that you feel good about and start, if you haven't ever done yoga before, start with somebody to help you along the way because there is a lot of kind of tips and alignment issues. I actually started with a VHS tape. It's like the 90s, right? I started with a VHS tape. And then when I finally started being able to find, yoga was not as big back then. So when I finally found a yoga teacher, I had to relearn a lot of stuff that I wasn't doing great. So really working with someone, at least initially, that in the same room can be great. Of course, there's lots of yoga online now too as an option, but I really think finding your local yoga practitioner is a good way to go. So for this invitation, I'm recommending it to you if you've never done yoga, or maybe you've done yoga in the past and you realize, oh, I remember I felt so good when I did it, but it's something that's fallen by the wayside. Then you might think about picking it back up again. And I just really do want to accentuate that there's just yoga for every single person out there, and even goats. So it's really, there's just a wide range of possibilities and how yoga works for all sorts of beings. And in case you're wondering, this is what yoga looks like for a cat. This is a yoga mat cat, or possibly like that. We could probably call that cat yoga too. All right, enough with the cats, Rosalie. Okay, okay, I get it. Next is body work, which is a broad term for different types of massage. There's many different modalities out there, all different kinds of massage. And there's many reasons that you might want to do it. There's, of course, just general relaxation, like with Swedish massage. There's lymphatic movement. I know I saw on the poll on Facebook, a lot of you did the lymphatic herbs invitation. This getting them someone else helping you with lymphatic massage can be a good way to go. It can also be pathology focused, which that's my background. I went to school for 4 years, 4 intensive years, learning structural integration as a structural medicine specialist. And we were very pathology focused. So we looked at like, what does it take to address like thoracic outlet syndrome or sciatica, but it was very focused on, working with the person holistically, but really thinking of, wasn't like a general, like, I'm going to work on the whole body for relaxation kind of thing. So depending on your interest in body work, whether it's relaxation or if it's something more focused, then you want to ask around and find exceptional practitioners because generally it's the people, the actual individual that makes a difference. So find out who's amazing in your community. And in the bodywork invitation, I just have more tips for finding someone, and I also list different types of modalities. And if you're wondering, like, is Rosalie really suggesting that my homework is a massage? Yeah, that's it. I am. I definitely am. All right. And I especially think structural integration is really, okay, I'm biased because that's what I did. But it is an interesting thing because it's looking about how the body is aligned in gravity. And it's a very fascinating field of body work and can be profoundly transformative for people. And don't forget that your cat also likes body work, right? The scratches, little face pressure there. So we cannot forget the cats ever. All right. Then the last invitation I have for you is a bath. And yes, I'm serious. So we looked at that study before showing that raising your internal temperature also has benefits for inflammation. I do highly recommend that folks are getting active in whatever way is possible. And I hope that I've made my case for that. But I also just want to, whether it's body work or a bath, there are things that we can do to really, relax our muscles and just give some joyful, soothing care to our muscles and nervous system. So, relaxing bath invitation in there. I have a simple recipe for to make an herbal bath because you can add herbs to your bath that will address inflammation. And yes, this means your homework is a bath. So you're welcome. We got two great, two great invitations this week of relaxation. And, and please do not give your cat a bath. So I just want to make that clear. Unless you know your cat likes baths, that happens sometimes. But you might find other ways to help your cat relax other than a bath. So that's just a general public service announcement. Okay, so you have all of your choices for invitations this week. Joyful movement, strength training, those are the two I'm accentuating. But if you've never done Qigong and Tai Chi or yoga, those can also be profoundly beneficial, as well as things like taking a bath or getting some body work done. So we are going to move towards the Q&A and your takeaway, but before you do, I recommend that you take 30 seconds, a minute, or however much time you want to, because basically, we can't see you anyway. But take some time to stand up, stretch, jump up and down, do some music or put on some music, do a little dance. And I'm really serious right now. So instead of just sitting here, like I'm going to do, because I'm going to wait for you, instead of just sitting here, get up, move around, feel some movement in just whatever way you would like. You could just walk in a circle for a little bit, however it is, but we cannot simply talk about movement. We have to get up and do it as well. So yeah, let's get to it. In fact, you know what I think I'm gonna do for this next section Q&A? I'm gonna stand up. So while you all are moving around, I'm gonna lift up my desk and I'm gonna go get my little cushy pad for my feet. I hope you all are moving. All right. I'm all set up. I might as well walk my talk, huh? So yeah, move around, enjoy. People are already asking questions. Did you move though? I want to hear that you moved. Um, all right. Let's get to it. All right, this is a great question, Kelly. Are there objective guidelines, say a certain heart rate or something on how to determine what is light intensity versus moderate intensity versus high intensity? And yes, there are very specific guidelines that I do not know off the top of my head. That's what your fitness tracker is looking for. And so, like when you have a fitness tracker, it'll tell you if you're doing light, moderate, or intense because it's looking at your heart rate specifically. So you can also, like those things, you see people running like in movies or something, and then they're taking their pulse. That's what they're doing is they're looking at their heart rate to gauge that. But that information can be very easily found online. I just can't. And there's a formula to figure that out because it's not the same for everybody. So there's formulas to figure out like what is your light versus moderate versus intense. All right, so this is an interesting question from Fran. You did talk mostly about raising body temperature today, but someone who feels better with a lower temperature than a higher when they feel pain, do you have some advice about it? So again, like with cold temperatures, what the cold temperature does is it slows the body down, which can be beneficial in the short term, but that temperature needs to be elevated again, right? Because low, like what's the word? I want to say like metabolic, like low metabolic processes in the body is not going to be good long term. So doing something like a hot cold bath, somehow alternating between hot and cold therapy is probably what's going to be most beneficial there. Herb question from Emily. Do you happen to know if Viburnum trilobum, a U.S. native, can be used interchangeably with Viburnum opulus, cramp bark? I have it growing near me and would like to harvest my own if possible. Yeah, that would be great. But I have no idea. I just don't know that particular species. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know. When I realized as much as we love the cat, I can probably take off the cat now. All right. All right. I stood up, rocked back and forth, and yeah, soothing and joyful. Good, done. Thanks for thanks for going for it. Um, all right. I'm going to have a hard time picking one invitation as usual. Yay! I like to hear that, but just because, that's good. It's good to have choices and interests and inspirations. Kate's wondering about fitness tracker recommendations. And I haven't like looked at all of them, so I don't know. Like I haven't vetted all of them or whatever. I use Fitbit, which again, I don't know if that's like the best or the worst. There's the Apple super fancy Apple Watch, which just seems like way overkill for what I want it for. And I'm sure there's others out there. There's probably like some tech journal that like rates the different ones in terms of their accuracy and what you want them for. So that would probably be a better source of information for me, just because I don't know all of them. But I do like my Fitbit. All right, Danny's wondering about defining moderate intensity, which is a great question. And I don't know if maybe this got typed in before I answered it before, but that is a specific thing looking at your heart rate variability. I mean, not sorry, not heart rate variability, your heart rate. And there are formulas online that you can type in your specific information and find out what is light versus moderate versus intense. Or you can cheat and get a fitness tracker, and that's what they'll tell you. What I used to do before fitness trackers were a big thing is that I just had a heart rate monitor that I would wear. And so then I could try, I knew what my levels were in terms of light, moderate, intense. And so my heart rate monitor would just tell me what my heart rate was, and then I would determine that for myself. And then again, you don't have to use anything. You can simply be like counting your heartbeats and figuring that out as well. That is certainly a possibility too. So you don't have to buy anything fancy. All right. And he's kicking ass on the movement. Usually have 2 strength training, 2 Pilates, 1 cycle, 1 HIIT, which is high intensity interval training, and 1 turbo kick class in a week. Sometimes I'll throw in something different. I love that you have so much variation going on. Catherine says, when you refer to meat, I assume that is specific to acute injury to muscles, right? It is, but can also absolutely apply to chronic muscles, to like a old injury that didn't rehab well. So that can also be applied there. Oops, sorry, things got. Lindsay said, "Are you going to talk about herbs for pain? You mentioned it earlier." In terms of herbs for pain, what we're thinking about, I kind of forgot that I mentioned that, but yeah, let's have a little mini class on that right now. So the first thing that we want to do, it's a great question, Lindsay, is think about why is there pain, right? It's always the why, not the what. So if there are herbs or if there's pain because of muscular tension or nervous system tension, then we want to work with herbs that are relaxing in nature, right? So it's like the cramp bark that I mentioned earlier. Lobelia is another one that's often used for musculoskeletal tension that's creating pain. So we want things to be relaxed. We want the musculature and the nervous system to relax so that then there's not that intense gripping, which is causing the pain. In terms of inflammatory pain, which of course is very, very common, Those herbs we've already talked a lot about. So that's our turmeric is, of course, like one of the number one inflammatory pain herbs. Um, Chamomile, if you're not sensitive to it, can be another wonderful herb for looking at inflammatory pain. And rosemary can be one that is an interest. Rosemary and I would say Tulsi too. Both of those can be wonderful for inflammatory type pains. But of course, that pain caused by inflammation is fully encompassing. So again, we want to even ask why is that? So is the reason for the pain sedentary life or not getting the strength training that you need? In that case, there's just no herbal substitute, right? They can be helpful, and things like turmeric and ginger can be helpful for post workout pain, but really we're looking at we want to use movement there as the ultimate one. So those would be two categories that I would think a lot about in terms of like there's no herb that's like ibuprofen, unfortunately. In that like you take it and it's like has this like broad spectrum pain relief. But the thing about ibuprofen is that it works as an anti-inflammatory, but it shuts down all inflammation, which is never really a good thing. And it also helps or it also suppresses secretions in your gut that help to line your digestive system. And so then you become susceptible to things like bleeding in your digestive tract, which is why so many people die, like 16,000 people a year die from ibuprofen overdose, or just not even overdose, even just taking it regularly can cause these problems, is because it's suppressing a much needed action in your body. So herbs that modulate inflammation don't work like ibuprofen, but they do not suppress inflammation in the same way. I thought of another herb that I really like for pain, which is valerian. Valerian's another one, kind of like cramp bark, that you can help to decrease that tension and can be very pain relieving on that part as well. St. John's wort is specific for nervous system pain. And so nervous system pain is something like that shoots through your body, and things like sciatica, thoracic outlet syndrome, anything that has like a shooting pain is probably nervous system related. And St. John's wort oil topically and then taken tincture or tea taken internally can be really wonderful for nervous system pain. St. John's wort can also be good for pain that's caused by the herpes virus, like cold sores or genital herpes or shingles. St. John's wort is wonderful for that as well. But in terms of like, yeah, again, there's just no ibuprofen like herb that's going to take care of everything. But instead, we have to look at the why and address it from that standpoint. All right. Stacy's mentioning the Aura ring. That's another great one. That's it's just a ring, so you don't have it like a watch, which I tried it once. I didn't like wearing a ring. I like my watch, but people who love the ring and don't want to wear a watch. So, either or there. I think the Aura ring was specifically developed for sleep, and so it has pretty like advanced sleep tracking. And Fitbit has kind of like raced to catch up to that, I think, because of that. But now Aura ring also has the fitness on there too. Kimberly says, is there any situation that ice would be best for short term than meat? For example, my mother after surgery, they are big on her using ice. I had her alternate between ice and heat. So I think that's a good thing to go between ice and heat. I am not a specialist when it comes to post surgery. My understanding is that rice for injury, not surgery, but for injury, there is a case for it for compartment syndrome, but is like definitely never good for ligament injuries, right? That's kind of like the worst for icing is when you have a like sprained ankle and you're spraining your ligament. But we can ask Sam more about that. I think she's a little bit more relaxed in her rice. But when she sent me her outline, one of the outline bullets was it just said rice, period, no period. But I talked about it with her a little bit later, and she says, sometimes at the very first beginning of an injury, within the first 24 hours, maybe people are still so attached to it because we've been told to do it for decades too. But to answer your question specifically, just to reiterate, Kimberly, not an expert when it comes to surgery. Oops, didn't mean to. Must have zoned out. Can you please get an example of treatment in meat? So, treatment, the T in meat stands for treatment, and that's working with somebody like a physiologist, a kinesiologist, a physical therapist, a personal trainer, perhaps if they have the training for that. But it's working with a trainer who can kind of help you work through that, which that could be a great question for Sam too, because that's exactly what she does. All right, Kim says, I'm always moving, but sometimes with injury, it hurts to move and healing times are varied. What do you suggest during the healing times to assist in pain relief? Let's ask Sam that question because she is going to answer it in a much more sophisticated way than I will. If you can't make the live class, send in your questions to Karen, and I'll do my best to ask her those questions. I think it is one thing that I know she's going to say is that it's very personalized and she's going to talk about pain and how it relates to the nervous system and how getting out of pain is often retraining our nervous system and how it interprets things. So, and it's often finding what movement you can do that doesn't create pain and then really focusing on that. But also another principle I really love with Sam is that you're training for your life. So you're moving your training to be more than what you would do in life so that it's like that's so if your training level is this high and your regular life capacity is this high, that's where you're at. So that there's this buffer between you and injury, right? If you're going above your your training capacity, that's when injury happens. So I think that she'll have a lot of interesting and innovative ways to answer that question. Amber says, do you find the heart rate variability to be accurate on the Fitbit? As far as I know, right? Because it's not like I'm hooked up to some other machine that's telling me. For me, I'm not really concerned about it being exactly accurate, but more to be I'm looking at trends more than like down to the single point. But when I did have the Aura ring, I wore both the Aura ring and the Fitbit, and they were pretty much the same. So that I liked seeing that they were pretty much the same. I'm so sorry that you hurt your back, Elaine. I know what back spasms are like, and I'm so sorry. But I'm glad that you're able to get some movement in, and I hope you're feeling better. This is a great question, Mary, and I think that that'll be a great question for Sam. And there's also physical therapists that specifically focus on pelvic tissues. One of my best friends is one of those people, which is why I know about it. So seeing somebody's, who's really specializes in that could be a good way to go too. Jenny, regarding all the invitations from each week, can you drink too many different teas like nettle oat straw infusion, gut healing, hawthorn tulsi? So I don't it's not like you really can drink too many teas, but you after a while it could get like if you have too many in your life, it might just be too many teas, right? Too much liquid consumption or too much of a bother or something. So it's more of like a quality of life thing rather than like a overdosing thing. With the ones you're talking about, these are all pretty nourishing and supportive. Marilee's suggesting lemon balm for muscle relaxation and pain. That is a wonderful. Bonnie says, "Because an Apple Watch function as a fitness tracker? I believe it can. Um, it might be, downloading different apps to make that work, which I think maybe now I'm seeing Karen is what she's saying. Oh, she's talking about iPhone app. I see. Yeah, so that's another way. Jenny, does this mean that you tested your blood glucose? How often times per day do you recommend blood sugar to be measured? And you do this forever. So it depends on where you're at. If you test it and you're good, then I would test it maybe 2 to 4 times a year just to keep an eye on it. And or once a year if you're like really there's just no issue there. If you have a lot of problems, then you might be wanting, especially in the beginning, is test fasting and then test your postprandial, so 1 hours and 2 hours after a meal. I don't recommend that forever, right? And you'll start to see when you start testing a whole bunch, you'll start to see trends. But initially, you'll probably want to test a lot to get a sense of your trends, get a sense of how things are going. But it's kind of like the more issues you're having, the more frequently I recommend testing. And then you'll just see where you're starting to like kind of get a sense of what things are going to be. And like, so there's just no one answer to this. It really just kind of depends on where you're at and where the amount of issues that you're having. I hope that helps. Let me know. But I would definitely say in the beginning, test a lot, and you can probably wane with time. And he's mentioning turmeric for muscle pain and joint issues, arnica cream. Arnica is a wonderful one. Thank you for mentioning arnica. And taping can be another method as well. Thanks. Danny says, I'm concerned about strength training while having knots in said muscles. Come ask Sam that question. I think that'll be a good one for Sam. I think, yeah, that's what I would do. Or send in your question. Bonnie, also another great question for Sam. I think water aerobics is fantastic. I'm a water baby myself. It's hard to keep me out of the water. So I want to be clear is that so strength training is very important, but it's not about creating pain or exacerbating the pain. That's not it. So it's about cleverly training your body to be able to handle more and more activities without pain. So if you have pain, I'm not saying do strength training, be in pain, and just suffer through it. Right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But in that situation, you do want to work with a trainer to help you figure out where you're at now and how to gently, slowly, but progressively be able to train more and more without pain. So I hope that helps, Bonnie. I think that'd be a great question for Sam. Oops, didn't mean to click that. Maggie says, do you have recommendations for self-correcting alignment issues? I've done structural integration 3 times. It's magic, but my person doesn't do it anymore. My recommendation would be, I love structural integration, as you probably all know now, but it would be strength training. I think that is, it's going to be activating your muscles in a way that's going to help with alignment. Jenny, I feel like you're hitting on a problem that all of us herbalists face. um, Mentioning I rotate dandelion chai blend and a golden milk, and I recently added in rosehip powder to smoothies and the Hawthorn Tulsi tea. So this goes back to my original question about too many teas. So it's not bad to take all of those, but I do when I said like this is a problem we all face is because it is pretty exciting. Like it's easy to get excited about all sorts of different plants and want to put them all into our lives. It's really up to you. I would say that my personal preference is I would rather work with fewer herbs in a day at higher dosages rather than work with 50 herbs and get a half a teaspoon of each of them in. That's my personal preference. It doesn't sound like that's what you're doing, so I'm not saying that you are, but just wanted to put that out there is that I think it's better to work with fewer herbs in a more concentrated way than to work with a ton of herbs with just a little tiny bit of them. In terms of therapeutics, right? Because there is the whole phytochemical, how many can we get in our day thing too, which is kind of a different talk. Sarah's asking about Relora. I don't know anything about that. Maggie says, I love lifting weights, but I continually reach an injury plateau and have recognized that it's due to pelvic rotation and resulting lopsidedness. Do you have any DIY recommendations? I don't have DIY recommendations. I think this is where having a clever personal trainer really comes in handy whether you see that person, for just a little while or long term. I think that's what you're missing there. And again, Sam would be a great person to ask these questions. Daisy says, is comfrey an herb that works for pain? Absolutely. That can be another wonderful herb, especially for injuries, but even chronic issues. Comfrey is a great one for. And I have a YouTube video or podcast on comfrey that was just released in September of 2022. If you're watching this on the recording, so you might want to go check out that too. Kim says, what about post-exercise stiffness? And this is one of the best things for post-exercise stiffness is movement. And you might have experienced this already in your life, but yeah, you wake up the next day, perhaps you overdid it, which is generally not the goal, which again, a personal trainer can help you not overdo it. That's actually what I did for so many years. For many years, I did not have a personal trainer. And just personality wise, I just always, went for it. And I would do like my kettlebell workout and I wouldn't be able to walk for 4 days. Like literally, I'd be in so much pain. But I was a slow learner in this regard. But a personal trainer really helped me to figure out where my level is at and work in ways that did not exasperate things. But sometimes it happens that you can do a little bit too much, but movement, just gentle walking, not overdoing it, just a really gentle walking can help with exercise stiffness. In terms of pain, like DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, there's studies with ginger and turmeric showing a lot of benefit for that. But again, of course, the goal is not to have pain. And Sam's going to talk about post-exercise pain too. All right, we're both at our standing desks. Love it, Karen. Danny's saying, yep, don't like the watches, really like the ring. And the recent release, there's an oxygen tracker. Fitbit also has oxygen tracker too. Lorraine says, if the why is rheumatoid arthritis, would the herbs that you mentioned be helpful? So again, the why, we have to even step back further because rheumatoid arthritis is the what. It's not the why. So that would be taking that step back further to look at why is rheumatoid arthritis manifesting, which, as I've mentioned through the course, could be gut health and intestinal permeability. I think we've talked about that at length. That could be a major cause of rheumatoid arthritis, but you're looking basically at immune system dysfunction. So yes, as mentioned, herbs like ashwagandha and turmeric can be very beneficial for people with rheumatoid arthritis, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. And really, you need to take further steps back to look at what's causing the rheumatoid arthritis. Jenny's sharing a win. Great news. Cholesterol levels dropped from 268 to 191. That's amazing in 3 months. Healthy phytonutrient-rich diet, increased intensity with resistance training, and added an organic psyllium husk and lots of teas. Love it. Thanks for sharing your win, Jenny. Wendy is asking about cat's claw. I've had intense burning in my hands, wrists, whole upper body. After about a month of taking this, I finally have relief. Would love to know why. That is actually an herb that I've just never worked with ever, and I'm familiar with it. Obviously, it has a really cool name, but it's just not one that I personally know a lot about. Yeah, so there's just not much more I can say about it, but I'm wondering if it powerfully modulates inflammation. It's one that's always been on my radar that I should look into more, but I just haven't done it yet. Jenny's following up saying using liver herbs too. So excited to see this huge drop without medication. I am too. I think that's just awesome. Bonnie missed the information about Sam's class. So Samantha Butts, my personal trainer, and this amazing, wonderful human being is I'm going to have a bonus class with her next Wednesday, November 2nd at 5:30 p.m. You'll get an email about it with the link to join live. If you can't join live, or if you're watching the recording, well, you can't join live, then send in, but it's before that happens. You can send in your questions to Karen. She'll round those up for me. Otherwise, if you're watching on the recording, you might already see this, kind of this interesting future time thing. That is November 2nd, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Maria's wondering about alleviating that debilitating morning stiffness that's so challenging when you first get up. So again, that could be caused by that's the what, but we don't know the why. And getting to those whys often are that's when you need to see a practitioner who can really do a breakdown of what's going on in your life and see what might be contributing in your life to that. Just some ideas to think about could be things like magnesium deficiency, digestion. Like I often see that with people who have poor digestion, not always, but that could be a thing to address. That's kind of like a saying. It's like that pain and stiffness in the morning after waking is related to internal things like digestion versus pain at the end of the day are often like a musculoskeletal or functional movement issue. But because I don't know, anything about you, Maria, it's hard to say, without like looking more deeply into your life, which is where a practitioner can come in. Another thing to think about would be hydration. Sometimes we do that classic thing where, um, well, this is kind of a different issue, I guess, but just something that's on my mind lately is I've just been seeing in some folks is like they don't drink during the day and then they get really thirsty at night and then they drink at night. But by then it's kind of like their electrolyte balance is imbalanced and it creates a lot of issues, basically chronic dehydration. So we're going to be talking about skin and dryness and hydration next class. And I guess too, Maria, I would say I would wonder if very gentle movement in the morning would be helpful. I also wonder about Abhyanga massage and if that would be helpful. Barbara, I'm not quite sure about this. One of my questions regarding exercise is what if you are very limber, but your muscles shorten when you stretch? I think that would be another good question for Sam because I'm not quite sure what to say about that. Fran says, do you have some advice about brain fog linked to inflammation in this course? Well, so brain fog is one of these like it's a what, right? And so we need to know the why. I hear that it's linked to inflammation. And so far, we have covered so many things that can address inflammation. So it kind of comes down to you. Why are you having inflammation that's then manifesting as brain fog? And, so sleep can be a huge one for brain fog. Digestion can be huge. Not getting enough protein. I think that one's overlooked a lot. Protein deficiency can lead to brain fog. Not getting the right nutrients. Um, being sedentary, not having enough movement and activity in your life. There's so many different things that could be contributing to that. So again, yeah, not the what, but the why. And that really comes down to looking at all of these things that we've been talking about. Lori's wondering if St. John's wort can be taken as an infusion for shooting nerve pain. Yes, it can. You do want to pay attention to medications, though. If you're on a lot of medications, chances are St. John's wort could be interacting with them. So you want to take that into consideration. I do like the oil topically, though. I think that is pretty fabulous, but the combination of them can be great too. Nancy says, I got my Apple Watch to use for fitness. I'm happy with it and use the Fitness Plus program also. Cool. Thanks for mentioning that. All right, so following up on the question about testing, Jenny says, I'm testing glucose about 6 times a day. So far, so good. But I know my A1C just came back at 5.7, so I need to lower that. Yeah, so this is kind of a great example of why monitoring your blood sugar, which I think I've mentioned before, is such a fabulous thing because Jenny's just like on the cusp and that's going to be fairly easy to fix, right? Jenny's already shared with us that she's seen so many improvements with her cholesterol, which is amazing. Um, So 6 times a day right now, as you're getting the hang of things is fine, and then, getting, an idea of how things are going on in your body, and I think it seems like you've been making all of these, like, really big, powerful changes, Jenny, and I think those are gonna add up, and you'll see that A1C lower with time too. There's also, in addition to all the powerful lifestyle things that you're doing that really are big bang for your buck, things like fresh nettle tincture can be one way to lower thing to have another little bit of extra help. Cinnamon, as mentioned before, too. But I feel like you are on the right track and things are happening. So, all right, now the most important comment of the night. Is that a new sweater? Love it. Thanks, Chit. Yeah. Brand new sweater. This is the Ursa sweater. Oops, maybe I should take off the thing. But yeah, this is my sweater. I just finished it. And Sam and I often joke. Sam, as you'll see, Sam is super fun. But I often tell her she's training me to be a knitter. um, and then sometimes I tell her I'd rather be knitting. But, that's just when she tells me to do plank for the fifth time, which is fair at that point. Um, Karen seconding what Heather said, which I might have missed, sorry. But I think this is a reaction to being sore in the morning. Karen says, I take a morning walk just before just about anything, and it really helps me in my day for many reasons, especially more joyful movement throughout the day. Thanks for sharing that. Oh, no worries. We would do it again, but no, that was the first sweater mentioned. Lindsay's wondering if transcripts are available to each class. If so, where? That's in the classroom. And yes, transcripts for every class that are available. Takes us about, over the weekend, basically, we have to get the transcripts made and designed and everything. So they're there by Monday generally. All right. I'm just there's lots of awesome comments. Loving it. So I'm answering the questions I just answered. Janet says, after rotator cuff surgery, I had to get on an ice cuff machine, I guess, to keep swelling down. So, what's the difference between swelling from surgery or swelling from an injury? I'm confused. So, as I said before, I am not trained in post surgical rehab. So, I just can't really comment on that. And I wouldn't want to say ice is bad in a situation that I don't know much about. But I do think this will be a great question for Sam. I'm so glad Sam's joining us this year because I'm definitely dumping a lot of stuff on her, but I think she'll be able to answer in a more sophisticated way. Maggie, this is a great question. Any mushrooms you would consider to be fitness allies? Um, Cordyceps is a great mushroom for a fitness ally because um, cordyceps is a wonderful herb for increasing your energy. And it's kind of a funky herb. I want to call it herb, but it's not. It's a funky kind of fungus mushroom. And that this is the one that like takes over insects. And it really made it big onto the scene when the one year the Chinese Olympics team were just killing it and everything. And it came out that they were using cordyceps, and then there was just like an explosion in the market. To get wild harvested cordyceps, it comes from up in the Andes, not Andes, forgetting that mountain range, Himalayas, I believe. But it definitely comes from very far away, and they take over these worms, and so they actually look like worms. But now those cost like tens of thousands of dollars per kilo, right? Because they've been, it's a big thing now. But they now we can get them grown. Fungi perfecti has a cordyceps. There's lots of cordyceps out there. But that can be a wonderful one for like just helping to kind of increase your energy levels, which could be a good thing to do, just to kind of increase your energy levels while also increasing your movement. And that actually reminds me of another herb because I always get these two confused. So cordyceps is a mushroom. Then there's corydalis. And you're asking about pain relief herbs. Corydalis is a wonderful one but it's kind of tricky in that, like, taken long term, there's been some issues with liver health. So Cordalis might be like the closest thing we have to an ibuprofen in terms of this kind of like all over pain relief. And it's often formulated a bit. I took Cordalis like when I had a root canal. So I've, taken it in those situations, but it's not something you want to take long term because of short term is fine, but long term there's been some liver issues. So Cordalis could be one to look in for pain. Barbara's wondering about input for someone with mild C1, C2 stability, and I feel like I'm becoming a broken record, but I'm gonna say let's ask Sam on that too. All right, just scrolling through some comments. Hannah says time, money, bother, skepticism can be barriers to incorporating herbs, especially in time of acute need. Any tips on helping someone try something alternative in response to pain or other health crisis? Yeah, so it's very difficult to convince somebody of something, especially when they are skeptic. So, my suggestion really is just for your friends and family and community to speak about your own experience and welcome those who are more curious and who want to learn more about what you share. Because I mean, I speak from experience that like trying to force somebody, that's kind of a strong word, but even just coerce somebody who is just not ready is a waste of time, is my opinion. So, just speaking from your experience and the positive impacts that you've had in your life from herbs and other healing modalities, and just letting that kind of be like the advertisement. And then again, welcoming people who are ready to explore that. But generally, you just have to wait till people are ready. And that's all that we can do on that one. Yeah, Diane, I'm glad you mentioned this, Diane. I can't use any of the fitness trackers. My body can't handle the electrical charge that happens as the device constantly measures heart rate. That is an issue for a small percentage of people, and I'm sorry that that's happening. So, in that case, but there's definitely old school methods of figuring out how to measure that by feeling your pulse, etc. P.S. I wish this class would go on for another 2 months. I'm enjoying it so much. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm excited to have these bonus teachers, of which Sam is one of them, coming up. There might be more. Hint, hint. Um, there's questions about transcripts, and I'm not quite following, but I think Karen's on it. Um, Fatina is mentioning Rooted Medicine Circle, which is the medicine making class that I host 10 months out of the year, and mentioning that's we do plant allies in there too. So that's Comfrey's Herb Plant Ally, and it's been so wonderful. It is truly an amazing, amazing plant. So I'm glad somebody mentioned that one. And thanks for chiming in about your plant ally, Fatina. I like to see that you all are encouraging yourself. I know Jenny had expressed a little bit of reticence about testing it, and Heather was encouraging her. So I'm glad to see that. Kathy says, I have to mention drinking water. I have more trouble moving and more pain when I'm dehydrated. Absolutely. Thanks for highlighting that again. And we'll talk more about that next week, but is absolutely applicable this week. Catherine says, do you think that too much multitasking can contribute to brain fog, dividing attention between too many stimulants? Yeah, interesting research too on multitasking and how that's just a complete farce, that it's impossible to multitask. But what abruptly changing our attention from one thing to another, which is what people call multitasking, actually does um, fatigue the brain in ways and causes an inability to focus in the long term. So, yeah, lots of interesting research on that that I'm sure you all could find to look into. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Lori says, "Is St. John's wort phototoxic?" So I do have a whole podcast, YouTube movie video on St. John's wort that looks at that a lot more in depth. The short answer is no, but with some caution. What is phototoxic is when they isolate constituents within St. John's wort, and or there might be some hypersensitivity in some individuals. But for the most part, whole St. John's wort is not going to cause that. But you could watch that episode or listen to that episode for more information about that too. Thanks for mentioning that because there are quite a few kind of like cautions or raised eyebrows with St. John's wort. So yeah, that's I'm glad you're bringing that up. Do you have a recipe for St. John's topical oil? I mean, basically, the recipe is to get fresh St. John's wort is my preference, although there's some evidence that dried might perhaps work, but fresh is definitely my favorite. So that's generally here in the northern hemisphere, something that we're looking into in the summer months only, and then doing a ratio of at least 1 to 10 of the fresh herb to oil on that. And if you're interested specifically in making infused oils, I'm going to be sharing training about that in just a few weeks with Cami McBride, who is kind of famous for her infused oils. Kim says, is stiffness from aging or like getting out of the car after an hour a functional movement issue or a nutrition issue? That is more of just like uh, I guess I would say a functional movement issue. And generally, the best thing for that, again, is movement, right? So that stiffness after inactivity is better with movement. And again, that could be something we talk to Sam about. Mary's wondering about willow bark for pain. So, willow bark is kind of famous for pain. The salicylates in it was what were extracted and then concentrated to make things like aspirin. The thing about willow bark that I have personally found is that it's just kind of all over the map. There are some willows that are stronger than others. So it's just not always sure what you're going to get. I think it works best as a modulator of pain. Sometimes for like acute pain things, you might have to take a lot of willow in order to get that first kind of big relief, and which then can be maybe titrated down over time. So willow is like, it's okay. I think it works better for some people than others, but I, I've found it hard personally for me to rely on it. Okay, just going through. KJ's wondering about your thoughts on arnica topically for inflammation. Arnica is absolutely amazing and can be a fabulous herb for the meat treatment, right? For that analgesic part. Arnica is wonderful at dilating capillaries and helping nutrition and hormones and enzymes move, through an injury. And arnica is great for acute injury. It's great for chronic pain as well. So it's definitely a powerful piece of that puzzle. All right, just scrolling through some chat to find another question. Francis says, I'm accepting the resistance training invitation, osteoporosis. Sounds like an issue. Any herbs to support building bone density, I use oat nettle infusions, but not consistent. So consistency with air can be really helpful, but also the resistance training. I think those are like kind of the two best recommendations there. So you are on the right track. And Heather's just taking on the small task of trying to figure out how to do all of this week's invitations. So let us know how that goes. But also, more seriously, remember you don't have to do it all this week, right? These are invitations you can keep um, coming back to over time. And so I would, don't try to do it all unless you really want to. But I just wouldn't want you to get overwhelmed. Jenny has another tea question. Can I combine the gut healing marshmallow cinnamon infusion with my nettle oat straw infusion and just drink it all together? I would have to revisit those, but I don't see a reason why you couldn't do that as long as maintain the same herbal dosages there. Diane's sharing that she's exercised her whole life, 60 years old, and I've been taking my heart rate the whole time. So there you go. And I also use an app on my iPhone for heart rate variability. And Mary's sharing her experience with Qigong and how it's very helpful. The effects of a 20-minute routine of gentle movements and breathing lasts throughout the entire day. That's been my experience too. And I didn't mention this, but I love that it is generally like a 15 or 20-minute experience. It's not something again that you have to do for hours every day. It's kind of this very focused time that really has big benefits. Kelly says, is the ginger cramp bark recipe you're using dried ginger root and cramp bark pieces, correct? Not powder? You could use either, but the powder is going to be harder to strain off. So I like the pieces for that. Lori says, I made red clover tea for a bath this afternoon. Lovely. Um, and can I add calendula hydrosol? Absolutely. Yeah. Leslie says, I'm taking Cammy's oil class right now. My oils are so much stronger. Good class. Yay. Chit says, love Cammy McBride. I made chamomile oil the other day with her method so I could have more bath tea bags for the mark. Nice. Karen's suggesting of spritzing the calendula hydrosol on after getting out of the bath. So lovely for the skin. I like that. Also, just because hydrosols can be kind of expensive if you're buying them. So that, spraying it on after a bath rather than putting it in the bath could be kind of a more cost effective way. Janet's wondering about yarrow to reduce swelling or bruising after an injury. Absolutely. That's another fabulous one. Thanks for bringing it up, Janet. Kelly says, someone mentioned sensitivity to electronics. Do you have any comments on inflammation caused by exposure to cell phones, laptops, etc., and environmental radiation in general, and herbs to help that? So, pretty much all of the herbs that were mentioned as plant allies are going to be the ones you want to turn to, of course. Reducing your exposure is going to be the best thing, number one. But if you'll remember, like with lemon balm, there was a very interesting study looking at nurses who worked in radiology and had inflammation associated with being around x-ray machines, and lemon balm helped to dramatically reduce that. So I think rather, and so that's like a particular study that we've seen with that showing the benefit. But for me, I think, herbs are just going to be a wonderful partner in helping us navigate through modern life. But then all of the things that we're doing, as we're getting towards the end of this class, it really is looking at all of these things that greatly contribute to inflammation and also greatly modulate inflammation. So again, it's looking at how strong is our digestion, how many phytonutrients are we getting in? Are we getting enough fiber? How is our gut flora? What's our nervous system like? What is our sleep doing like? Are we moving? These are truly the heavy hitters when it comes to modulating inflammation. So we want to keep all of those in mind. Of course, that's why we do it week by week so it doesn't get overwhelming. But those are things we want to be thinking about. Do you find Meadowsweet to be good for pain? I do think that Meadowsweet for me has had more consistency than Willow Bark. I almost mentioned it when we were talking about Willow Bark the other moment. But it's still not necessarily an ibuprofen like in effect. So I just want to mention that so that people don't have the expectation of like, oh, I'm going to stop taking ibuprofen and take Meadowsweet and expect the same thing. However, it does a wonderful job at modulating inflammation and it's great taken long term. And again, you might need to take more at first, and then you can kind of wean down for the same effects. Hannah says, other than growing every herb I or my family or friends could ever need, which I aspire to do, yay! Suggestions for how to have these powerful plant preps available and not expired for acute situations. Well, that is a tough one, right? All I don't really I mean, things just expire, right? So either you're moving through your own products very quickly or you're buying them, in small amounts as needed. So, of course, freezers can be helpful, but even then, things are only going to stay in the freezer for so long. So, that's just the nature of things, right? Is it's going to expire. So, I don't know that I have a good answer for you on that because it's just the way of the world. Yeah, I would say, like, well, just thinking about the freezer, like comfrey poultice. I mean, well, I guess it's just a huge question too, right? Because my mind goes to all these different things. Like a comfrey poultice, if you watch my YouTube video, we'll show you exactly how to make a comfrey poultice, and then I talk about how you can freeze it. But you're gonna have to make that every year because it's about a year in the freezer, and then you probably want to move on. Other things we've been talking about, St. John's wort oil, again, it's only good about a year. So you just want to be able to make small amounts, move through what you use, and keep making it fresh every year. I guess would be the answer to that. And or if you don't want to make your own products, buying them from health food stores or online apothecaries. All right. Elaine's wondering about oat tops good for foot hand baths. That's not one that I've personally tried, so I'm not quite sure, Elaine. It'd be worth trying and then reporting back what you thought, especially over time, I would think. Fran says, about my previous question, I did get brain fog since I got COVID in June this year. Do you have some advice about it with inflammation? I don't know how to give specific advice to you, Fran, just because I don't know you and I don't know what your life is like. All I can really suggest is looking at this portrait of chronic inflammation that we've been looking at the major players that are contributing to inflammation. Just so, for example, tonight we talked about exercise specifically in relationship to long haul COVID and post COVID and how important exercise is for recovery. We also know that exercise is very important for cognition in general. So I just don't know what are the levels of exercise that you're already getting, what types of exercise. That's in this realm, it's like I'm presenting these invitations for you, whether it's joyful movement, strength training, yoga, qigong, tai chi, and offering you the opportunity to say what's missing in my life, what's interesting, what inspires me, what am I pulled towards, and then you choosing that to see what is going to make the difference. If you have more specific questions, like let's say that you're like Annie and you're doing, your Pilates and your high intensity interval training and you do Tai Chi and Qigong and you're like already checking off all of those boxes, then working with a practitioner can be a good way to look at things specifically for you. But again, I don't know how you're sleeping. I don't know how you're digesting. I don't know how you're moving. I don't know what stress levels are in your life. So I really can't answer that for you, but I do suggest looking at this course as all of these possibilities that can be contributing to it. I wouldn't, I see that COVID-19 kind of precipitated it, but just because it precipitated it doesn't mean that all of these things we are talking about aren't relevant because they still are super relevant. But if you're like, I have got this all, I'm doing it all. I sleep well. I eat such a phytonutrient rich diet. My gut flora is healthy. My digestion's healthy. I have no stress, or at least I'm reacting well to the stress that is in my life because who doesn't have stress? I'm exercising. If you are knocking off everything and you're saying, I'm doing it all and I'm still having a problem, then you want to see a practitioner, right? That's that like extra level, which is, I think, I talked about, was it last week, right? And the what I wish I would have said. But that's when that comes in. So this is this DIY experience where you get to choose things that are missing in your life. But if you're not seeing anything that's missing in your life, then working with a practitioner is the way to go. All right. I hope that helps at least point you in the right direction. Francis checking in on how things are going. I've made violet infusion this week for lymph massage. Lovely. I'm glued to the breath book and already doing some of the practices, basically observing my behavior. Lovely, Francis. Thanks for sharing. Denise says, can you suggest any brands for buying salves like Arnica and Comfrey? Hmm. Trying to think like off the top of my head. So many of the places I buy from are practitioner focused. So unfortunately, they just don't they don't sell to everybody. You have to like prove you're a practitioner. Like for example, I love Galen's Way. They have pretty amazing stuff. What you might do is go to Etsy and try and find a groovy herbalist who's making this stuff. Look at the color, right? Look at the color of their salves. If they're selling a comfrey salve, you want that to be green, green, green. You want to make sure they're making super potent stuff, but that could be a good way to go. You could look at your like local health food store, but the stuff that's like made really well by grassroots herbalists are generally something I like more than something that's mass produced. Heather's wondering, is the strength of digestion solely determined by the quality of poop, constipation, diarrhea, etc., or is there more to it? There's definitely more to it, which we talked about in the digestion class. It could be frequent feelings of gas or bloating, could be stomach cramping, could be feeling like you eat something and it just sits in your stomach, could be feeling like you have to be very careful of what you eat to not upset your digestion. So you might want to revisit that class because we talked about that kind of in the beginning of the class, I believe. Oh, Sabrina's asking about wild lettuce for topical pain, and um, that is not a plant that I have worked with specifically, but I interviewed Seja Popham this summer. So that's the summer of 2022. And which I'm saying for folks who might be watching the recording later on. And he talks all about wild lettuce and and there's a recipe in there of how to make your own wild lettuce tincture, 7 songs method. But you might want to go check out that because Seja is so brilliant and he has a lot of personal experience there. So check that out. Kate, oh, tooth extraction last week. So sorry. I got one extracted last year. It was not the time of my life, I'll tell you that much. So sorry, but I'm glad to hear that meat is going well for healing, and I hope that you continue to recover well. Oh, thanks for clarifying that, Hannah, because I can see I did not answer your question at all. How to have the array that's needed. The list of fabulous herbs is vast, or just select a few faves that I lean on. Not sure how to tailor care with only a few standards. Yes, so I'm all about the like lean on the same ones over and over again because you get to know them so well and use them in a variety of situations. So, yes, I would. I personally think that focusing on less herbs that really intimately well is going to be better than having a ton of herbs. And really, there are herbs like comfrey and arnica that are just broad ranging and have so many topical benefits that can really do so much. So, I mean, just in those two for topical stuff is going to be great. So, yeah, I go with the few rather than the many. Ah, That's very sweet, Lori. When's my next course offering? I can't go too long without your teaching. Well, Lori, I know you're already in Rooted Medicine Circle, which will enroll in January. And I am playing with the idea of offering a new kind of new course. I think maybe I already mentioned it here, or maybe it was in Rooted Medicine Circle. I can't remember now, but I'm thinking about totally re-envisioning my herbal energetics or taste of herbs course, which I know that some of you have had through learning herbs. So they previously produced that course. And I think I created that course in like 2013 or something. So next year will be 10 years. And so I want to just completely re-envision it and produce it through my own business with Learning Herbs Blessing. So that's what I'm kind of playing around with it. Not 100% sure, but that's what I'm thinking about for next year. I also have some other ideas about some flower festivals, but yeah, nothing quite sure yet. Oops, didn't mean to click on that. Thanks for your kind words, Chit. I saw those. Um, Yep, Seja, another favorite. He's an awesome teacher, so easy to learn from. And I think you probably all got an email from me today, for those of you who are taking this course live, about Sage's Vitalist mini series training. I love that it's such a like perfect parallel to what this class is about in terms of looking at the why and not the what, but also for those of you who are interested in becoming an herbal practitioner, like the person who asked previously, like, how do you talk people into this? But people who are interested in that like next layer of working with other people and plants, Sage is a great guide for that. So that mini series is happening right now. It only happens like once or twice a year. So if you're not seeing this right away, it might not be available, but highly recommend that. And you should have gotten an email about that today. Jenny's wondering, am I still connected with Learning Herbs? I am. As a business, also, John and Kimberly and I, we go way back. I used to live in their basement. So, yeah, still very much connected. I taught for them earlier this week for an Herb Mentor Live, but I am more, investing more of my energy into Herbs with Rosalie, my business. And so just kind of popping in here and there with Learning Herbs. This is interesting, Amber. Tulsi is my plant ally, and many herbal companies are out. Some are listing that they only have Oxymum X africanum. Thoughts about this variety? I'm not familiar with that variety at all. The X in the middle there signifies it's a hybrid, so I'm just not sure. I would look, to find more information about it for sure. I can't say that I have any experience though. Oshala Farms. I keep hearing wonderful things about Oshala Farms. Francis is recommending them for Tulsi. Well, I have magically gotten to the end of this list. If you asked a question and I didn't get to it, then please type it in again. Or if something was like on the tip of your tongue that you want to ask, please do. I also, as I've been mentioning all evening, we're going to have part 2 of this with Sam. Bring your questions. As I said, I'm so excited for what she's going to share. And I think she'll really be able to bring her specificity and her expertise to answer some of these questions that you all had tonight, but also just to really show like what it means to turn towards movement and strength training as a way to decrease pain. And again, she's super fun. We have so much fun together, which is saying a lot because she makes me do a lot of things I don't generally think of as fun, like the planks that I mentioned previously. But my body has been totally transformed with working with her and other personal trainers as well. Um, I think now I can't remember, but I told you the story. I had the hip problem that wasn't resolved. I mean, for decades I suffered through that and didn't have, relief until I found strength training. But it is really important that we're talking about progressive strength training that's at your level, that's not exacerbating your pain, but it's also helping you keep moving forward. So for a while during my search, I had a personal trainer that was really, they just had a different focus. And so they were more focused on doing the same things every week and with a little bit of variation, but it wasn't this progressive strength training like Sam does. And I think that's really the ticket. Um, so yeah, I'm excited for her. Hannah says, I am at heart a beginning herbalist. Nursing is my background. So, in favor of the few fab herbs approach, might it make sense to learn a few that can relate to each body system for good coverage? Yes, absolutely. All right. Francis is wondering, how do we get to Sam's class? I will send the link out on Wednesday. And if you're watching through the recordings, it might already be available for you. So keep a lookout for that within the classroom. Looks like we're getting to the end of questions. I'll just stall here a little bit. And Elaine says, any thoughts about herbs to strengthen teeth from the inside out? And so our deep mineral herbs like nettle and oat straw and horsetail, those deep, super mineral rich herbs are the ones that you're going to want to turn to for that. And we're going to talk about oral health next week. I didn't know quite where to put it. So we got stuck into the skin section and dryness section. So we're going to talk about oral health next week. All right. So looks like we're getting to the end of questions again. As always, it's been such a pleasure to hang out with you. I love your enthusiasm. I love your questions. Your questions make me see things I kind of, there was a little hole in there. So I love that they clarify things, make me think about new things. So I really appreciate all of your enthusiasm and for being here live and for you watching the recording. Thank you also so much for being here. All right, so I think that's going to close down tonight, and I will see you next Wednesday night for a live class with Samantha Butts. And again, if you have questions in relationship to pain and movement, feel free to write into Karen, support at herbswithrosalie.com. And she's just finding out about this tonight, but she's going to round up those questions. I'll try to get them into Sam. And you can either watch live or watch the recording. And then just the next day, it'll be kind of a 2 nights in a row thing. Next day, we'll be here for week 7, which will be about skin and dryness. So, looking forward to seeing you both those nights, either live or on the recording. All right. And I also look forward to hearing what invitations you chose through the Facebook poll. So, we'll be looking at that too. All right. It's been a fabulous night. Thanks, everyone. And I'm excited to hear how you're moving this week. All right. Bye bye.